The airport terminal thrummed with early morning chaos. Voices merged into a constant hum, punctuated by the sharp click of rolling luggage wheels against polished floors. Overhead speakers crackled with departure announcements that nobody seemed to hear. Julia Harper wove through the crowd, her shoulder bag sliding down her arm for the third time in as many minutes. She hitched it back up without breaking stride. Her tablet balanced precariously in her other hand, screen illuminated with bullet points she'd already memorized. Senior Marketing Strategist, Griffin Digital Solutions, final interview. The words scrolled through her mind like a mantra. 3 months unemployed, savings account dwindling. This interview represented more than a job. It was validation that the layoff hadn't been about her competence. Her reflection caught in a window as she passed. Auburn hair pulled back in what she'd hoped looked professional, but now seemed too severe. Navy blazer, white blouse, black pants. Standard interview uniform. Unremarkable. She glanced at her watch. 6:47. Her flight didn't board until 7:30, but she'd arrived 2 hours early anyway. Anxiety had a way of distorting time management. The coffee kiosk appeared ahead, its espresso machine hissing steam. The line moved slowly. Julia shifted her weight from foot to foot, reviewing her mental notes. The company's recent acquisition, their expansion into Southeast Asian markets, the campaign she developed specifically for this interview. A gap opened in the crowd. She stepped forward. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket, glancing at the screen. An email notification. Subject line, interview confirmation. She tapped it open, not watching where she was walking. The collision happened fast. Her shoulder struck something solid. The impact sent her stumbling sideways. Hot liquid splashed across fabric. A male voice made a sound somewhere between surprise and resignation. Julia's tablet clattered to the floor. Time crystallized into sharp focus. A tall man stood before her, coffee spreading across his white dress shirt in an expanding brown stain. The liquid had hit him chest high, soaking through to his charcoal suit jacket. Droplets clung to the fabric before gravity pulled them downward. His briefcase lay at his feet, expensive leather, the kind that cost more than her monthly rent. "Oh my God," Julia's voice came out strangled. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She lunged for the napkin dispenser at the nearest table, grabbing a fistful. The paper napkins seemed pathetically inadequate against the damage she'd caused. "I wasn't looking. I'm so sorry. Here, let me—" She thrust the napkins toward him, then froze. Was she supposed to help? That seemed too familiar. But standing there doing nothing felt worse. The man looked down at his ruined shirt. His expression remained neutral. Not angry exactly. More like someone calculating the inconvenience. "It's fine." His voice was calm, deep, the kind of voice accustomed to being heard. "It's not fine." Julia dabbed uselessly at his jacket sleeve. The coffee had already soaked through. "Your shirt is ruined. Your suit. I'll pay for the dry cleaning, or replacement, whatever you need." She was babbling. She could hear herself babbling, but couldn't stop. He gently caught her wrist, stopping her frantic attempts to blot the stain. His grip was firm, but not harsh. "Really, it's fine." Julia looked up at him properly for the first time. Steel gray eyes met hers. He was probably in his mid-30s, dark hair styled in that effortlessly professional way that definitely wasn't effortless. Angular jaw, the kind of face that belonged in boardrooms. Her stomach dropped further. This wasn't just some random traveler. Everything about him screamed important. The suit alone probably cost thousands. The watch on his wrist caught the fluorescent lighting. Swiss. Expensive. "I'm so sorry," she repeated, retrieving her wrist from his grip. "I was checking my phone. Stupid. Completely my fault. Accidents happen." He bent down, retrieving her tablet from the floor. A small crack spiderwebbed across the corner of the screen. He held it out to her. Julia took it, adding broken tablet to her mental list of morning disasters. The man picked up his briefcase, assessing the coffee damage with the resignation of someone whose day had just become significantly more complicated. "You're traveling," he gestured to her carry-on. "Interview. I have an interview." Why was she telling him this? Which I'm now going to be late for because I need to find somewhere to clean up. She gestured helplessly at her own blazer. Blazer. Coffee had splashed back on her, leaving dark spots across the navy fabric. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Good luck with that. He walked away, merging into the crowd with the ease of someone who navigated busy spaces frequently. Julia watched him go, her face burning with humiliation. A janitor appeared with a mop, giving her a look that suggested this wasn't his first coffee-related incident of the morning. Julia grabbed her belongings and fled toward the nearest restroom. The bathroom mirror confirmed her fears. Coffee stains dotted her blazer in an unfortunate pattern. She ran water over paper towels and scrubbed at the spots. The water made them worse, spreading the stain into larger, paler blotches. Perfect, she muttered. Just perfect. She gave up, letting her hair down to soften her appearance, then immediately put it back up. Looking disheveled seemed worse than looking severe. The gate area was crowded when she arrived. Julia found a seat near the window, slumping into it with the exhaustion of someone who'd been awake since 4 a.m. An elderly woman sat beside her, knitting something blue. Rough morning? The woman's voice held gentle amusement. Julia glanced down at her ruined blazer. Does it show? Only a little. The woman pulled a packet of tissues from her purse. Here, sometimes blotting works better than scrubbing. Thank you. Julia accepted the tissues, touched by the unexpected kindness. Interview? That obvious? You have the look. My granddaughter gets the same expression, like she's trying to remember everything at once. The woman's needles clicked rhythmically. You'll do fine. Julia wanted to believe her. The boarding call crackled through the speakers. Passengers began queuing, carry-ons in hand. Julia joined them, her tablet tucked securely in her bag, her blazer still damp and stained. The flight passed in a blur of recycled air and anxiety. She reviewed her notes until the words blurred together. When the plane touched down, her hands were shaking. The cab ride to Griffin Digital Solutions took 20 minutes through unfamiliar streets. The building appeared suddenly, all glass and steel and modern architecture. It rose 15 stories, reflecting clouds in its mirror-finish windows. Julia paid the driver, tipping more than she should have. The lobby was everything she'd imagined. Minimalist furniture, abstract art, a reception desk that looked carved from a single piece of marble. Young professionals moved through the space with purpose, tablets and coffee cups in hand. She approached the desk. The receptionist smiled professionally. Julia Harper, I have an interview at 11. Of course, I'll let them know you've arrived. Please have a seat. The waiting area offered a view into the office proper through floor-to-ceiling glass walls. Julia watched people collaborate around standing desks, gesture at wall-mounted screens, laugh at something on someone's laptop. This was the kind of place where careers happened. Miss Harper? A woman approached. Late 20s, dark hair, arena in a sleek bob, sharp features softened by a genuine smile. She extended her hand. Rebecca Torres, head of HR. Welcome to Griffin Digital. Her handshake was firm. Thank you for having me. They walked toward the elevators, Rebecca making small talk about her flight, the weather, the usual pleasantries. Julia responded automatically, her mind already shifting into interview mode. The elevator rose smoothly. Rebecca pressed the button for the 12th floor. I've reviewed your portfolio, Rebecca said. Your work with the Dawson campaign was particularly impressive. Thank you. That project taught me a lot about cross-platform integration. We're looking for someone who can think strategically across multiple channels, someone creative but data-driven. The elevator doors opened. They walked down a corridor lined with conference rooms. Through the glass walls, Julia could see meetings in progress, whiteboards covered with diagrams, teams deep in discussion. Rebecca stopped at a room near the end. We'll be starting in just a few minutes. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Julia's mind flashed to the airport incident. Water would be great. Rebecca disappeared. Julia entered the conference room, setting her bag on a chair. The space was immaculate. A large table dominated the center, surrounded by ergonomic chairs. One wall was entirely glass, offering a view of the city below. She was here, actually here. Rebecca returned with water, followed by a man in an expensive suit, older, maybe early 40s, graying at the temples. His expression was neutral to the point of coldness. Philip Wade, VP of Operations. No handshake. He took a seat at the head of the table. The interview began. Rebecca asked about her background. Philip questioned her employment gap with pointed precision. Julia answered honestly, explaining the layoffs, the market conditions, her decision to be selective rather than desperate. Philip didn't look convinced. She walked them through her portfolio, explaining the strategy behind each campaign. Rebecca took notes. Philip checked his phone twice. Julia was midway through describing her approach to brand positioning when the door opened. She turned. The man from the airport stood in the doorway. He'd changed his shirt, different suit jacket, but same gray eyes, same angular jaw, same face that now represented her absolute worst nightmare. Their eyes met. Recognition flickered across his expression, quickly masked. Julia's sentence died in her throat. The room tilted slightly. Rebecca stood. "Mr. Griffin, thank you for joining us." "Mr. Griffin? No, this is Nathaniel Griffin, our founder and CEO. The man walked calmly to the table, taking a seat beside Philip. His expression revealed nothing. "Sorry I'm late." His voice was exactly as she remembered, calm, controlled. Rough morning, unexpected complications. His eyes found hers again, held them for just a moment too long. Julia's water glass trembled slightly as she set it down. Nathaniel Griffin settled into his chair with the ease of someone who owned every space he entered. Metered. His presence shifted the room's energy. Philip sat straighter. Rebecca's pen hovered above her notepad. Julia forced herself to breathe. "Please continue, Miss Harper." Nate gestured toward her open portfolio. "I'd like to hear your thoughts on integrated marketing strategies." His tone was professional, detached, as if they'd never met, as if his shirt hadn't been soaked with coffee 2 hours ago because of her. Julia's mind raced. Should she acknowledge it, apologize again, pretend it never happened? His expression gave nothing away. She chose pretense. Of course, her voice came out steadier than she felt. "As I was explaining, successful campaigns require cohesion across all consumer touchpoints." She pulled up a case study on her tablet, ignoring the crack in the corner of the screen. The presentation she'd rehearsed countless times flowed automatically, muscle memory overriding panic. This campaign increased engagement by 43% over 6 months by creating complementary content specific to each platform rather than duplicating the same message. Nate leaned forward slightly. "What made you choose that particular demographic breakdown?" The question was sharp, probing. It cut straight to the analytical foundation of her work. The existing data showed 3 distinct user behaviors. Trying to target them uniformly would have diluted the message. Segmentation allowed for personalization while maintaining brand consistency. And the budget allocation? Weighted toward platforms with highest conversion rates. But maintaining presence across all channels to avoid audience fragmentation. Philip cleared his throat. "These numbers are impressive, Miss Harper, but this campaign was 18 months ago. What have you been doing since?" The question landed like a slap, polite in wording, cutting in intent. "I was laid off when my previous company downsized their marketing department. Since then, I've been consulting independently while searching for the right full-time position." Consulting. Philip's tone suggested he found this unconvincing. With whom? Several small businesses, a nonprofit organization, local clients building their digital presence. So nothing at the scale we operate? Julia felt heat creep up her neck. Scale is relative. The principles remain consistent. Understanding audience psychology, creating compelling narratives, measuring and adjusting based on data. Those fundamentals apply whether you're reaching 100 people or 100,000. Or 100 million, Nate added quietly, which is where we're headed in the next 18 months. He pulled a folder from his briefcase, sliding it across the table to her. Hypothetical scenario. A client comes to us with a failing social media presence, 20,000 followers, but engagement rates below 1%. They're spending significant money on ads with minimal return. You have 5 minutes to diagnose the problem and propose a solution. Julia's hands went cold. This wasn't part of the standard interview format. This was a test. She opened the folder. Analytics. Lytics printouts. Demographic data. Sample posts. She scanned quickly, her mind shifting into the pattern recognition she'd developed over years of campaign analysis. The room fell silent except for pages turning. Rebecca and Philip exchanged glances. Nate watched Julia with the intensity of someone evaluating not just her answer, but her process. 3 minutes passed. Julia looked up. The content is competent but generic, safe. It's trying to appeal to everyone and therefore resonates with no one. The paid ad targeting is too broad. They're paying to reach people who will never convert. She pointed to a specific post. This received their highest engagement. It's personal, specific. It shows vulnerability rather than polish. That's what their audience responds to. So your recommendation? Nate's expression remained neutral. Narrow the focus. Identify their core audience segment, the people actually engaging, not just following. Create content specifically for them, raw, authentic, less concerned with perfection, more concerned with connection. Reallocate ad spend to target lookalike audiences based on their engaged users, not their total followers. That's a significant pivot from their current strategy, Philip interjected. High risk. Higher risk is continuing to spend money on an approach that isn't working. Julia met his eyes. Sometimes playing it safe is the riskiest choice. Nate's fingers drummed once against the table. Implementation timeline? Immediate content shift. Results measurable within 2 weeks. Full campaign? Campaign adjustment over 30 days with weekly metric reviews. And if the engagement drops further initially, then we adjust. Marketing isn't about perfect first attempts. It's about informed iteration based on real data. Something shifted in Nate's expression, not quite approval, more like recognition. Rebecca made several notes. Philip looked less impressed, his jaw tight. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Questions about team collaboration, handling difficult clients, managing multiple projects simultaneously. Julia answered each one, her initial panic subsiding into focused competence. This was what she knew, what she was good at. Finally, Rebecca closed her portfolio. I think we have everything we need. Do you have any questions for us? Julia asked about company culture, growth trajectory, professional development opportunities, standard questions that demonstrated interest without seeming desperate. Philip answered most of them with corporate precision. Rebecca added warmer details about team dynamics. Nate remained largely silent, his attention fixed on Julia in a way that made her hyper-aware of every gesture. Thank you for your time, Miss Harper. Rebecca stood, extending her hand. We'll be in touch soon. Philip left first, barely acknowledging her. Rebecca gathered her materials, excusing herself to take a phone call in the hallway. Julia began packing her portfolio. The door closed behind Rebecca. Silence filled the conference room. Nate remained seated, his gray eyes finally showing something. Beyond professional assessment, amusement? Maybe. Or curiosity. You're either very brave or very desperate to still show up after this morning. Julia's hands stilled on her bag zipper. I'm sorry. Again, I should have said something when you walked in. I just didn't know if acknowledging that you dumped coffee all over me would help or hurt your chances. Something like that. And you chose to pretend it never happened? I chose to focus on why I was here. Nate leaned back in his chair, studying her. That was the right call. Julia didn't know what to say to that. Your presentation was strong. Your analysis of the engagement problem was solid. You think strategically. He paused. Philip doesn't think you're right for this role. The bluntness caught her off guard. And Rebecca? On the fence. What do you think? The question came out before she could stop it. Too direct, too personal. Nate stood, collecting his briefcase. He walked to the window, looking out at the city below. His reflection ghosted against the glass. I think you handle pressure better than you give yourself credit for. He turned to face her. I also think you apologize too much for things that aren't entirely your fault. Spilling coffee on you was definitely my fault. You were distracted, anxious about this interview. You made a mistake. It happens. His expression was unreadable. The question isn't whether you spilled coffee, it's whether you could function professionally afterward. You did. Julia wasn't sure if she was being complimented, or evaluated. Possibly both. We'll be in touch, Miss Harper. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the handle. The shirt was expensive, but I keep extras in my office for emergencies, so you can stop mentally calculating replacement costs. He left before she could respond. Julia stood alone in the conference room, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had no idea if the interview had gone well or been a complete disaster. The elevator ride down felt longer than the one up. The lobby seemed too bright, too crowded. She pushed through the glass doors into afternoon sunlight. Her phone rang before she reached the street corner. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? Miss Harper, this is Rebecca Torres. Julia's stomach clenched. Too soon. This was too soon to be calling back. We'd like to offer you a position with Griffin Digital Solutions. Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. However, there is a condition. The relief evaporated. Rebecca's voice carried through the phone with professional precision. The senior strategist position requires unanimous approval from our executive committee. We don't have that currently. Julia's grip tightened on her phone. The street noise around her faded into background static. What we can offer is a 3-month trial position, associate level. If you prove yourself during that period, you'll be promoted to the role you interviewed for with full salary adjustment. Associate level. Julia's mind calculated quickly. Lower pay, probationary status, starting from the bottom. What does the trial period entail? You'd work directly with our client services team, real projects, real deliverables. At the end of 3 months, the executive committee votes again. Julia watched professionals stream past her on the sidewalk. People with established careers, stable incomes, certainty about their next paycheck. She had none of those things. Can I ask whose decision this was? A pause, brief but noticeable. It was a committee decision. Mr. Griffin approved the terms. Of course he did. The man whose shirt she'd ruined was now offering her a probationary position like some kind of consolation prize. Pride warred with necessity. Pride lost. I accept. Excellent. HR will send onboarding paperwork this afternoon. Your start date is next Monday. Welcome to Griffin Digital, Miss Harper. The call ended. Julia stood on the sidewalk outside the building where she'd just been offered a job that wasn't quite the job she'd wanted. The glass tower reflected clouds sliding across its surface, distorting them into abstract shapes. She should feel grateful. She needed this position. 3 months wasn't forever. But the coffee incident hung over everything like a stain that wouldn't wash out. Monday morning arrived with the particular anxiety of first days. Julia dressed carefully in gray slacks and a cream blouse, professional without trying too hard. She arrived 15 minutes early, her stomach tight with nerves. Security issued her a badge with her photo and name. The laminated card felt heavier than it should. The elevator deposited her on the 8th floor. Different from where she'd interviewed, more open. Desks arranged in collaborative clusters rather than private offices. A blonde woman approached, hand extended, smile warm. Julia Harper, I'm Morgan Press, your direct supervisor. Welcome to the chaos. Morgan was 31, efficiently dressed, with the kind of energy that suggested she ran on coffee and competence. Her handshake was firm, her demeanor immediately putting Julia at ease. Let me show you to your desk. They wove through the floor. People glanced up, offering friendly nods. The space hummed with productivity. Phones rang, keyboards clacked. Somewhere, someone laughed. Julia's desk sat near a window, part of a 4-person pod. Clean surface, new computer, a small succulent plant in a ceramic pot. That's from the team, Morgan said. Tradition for new hires. Try not to kill it. We're keeping score. Julia smiled, despite her nerves. No pressure. Your login credentials are here. Morgan handed her a folder. First assignment is supporting the Meridian Tech pitch. Big client, demanding timeline. Philip Wade is leading it. The name sent a small jolt of recognition through Julia. The VP who'd questioned her employment gap, who'd looked unimpressed throughout her entire interview. He knows I'm on the team? He requested you specifically. Morgan's expression suggested this wasn't necessarily good news. Philip can be intense, detail-oriented. He expects excellence, which is fine. Just be prepared for him to be very hands-on. Over the next 2 weeks, Julia learned that hands-on was a generous description. Philip micromanaged everything. He assigned her research tasks, then questioned her sources. He had her compile data, then criticized her formatting. When she proposed content angles for the Meridian pitch, he listened with an expression of thinly veiled skepticism. That's an interesting idea, Miss Harper, but perhaps we should stick with proven approaches for a client this significant. The ideas appeared in the pitch deck 3 days later, credited to Philip's strategic vision. Julia said nothing. She arrived early, stayed late, her desk filled with project notes, campaign mock-ups, demographic analyses. The succulent remained alive, which felt like her only clear victory. Morgan noticed. During a coffee run, she leaned against Julia's desk, voice low. Philip's testing you. He does this with new people, especially people he didn't want hired. He didn't want me hired? He voted against you in committee, thought you were underqualified. Morgan sipped her latte. For what it's worth, your work is solid. The team sees it, even if Philip takes credit. Julia appreciated the validation, but it didn't change her situation. 3 months of proving herself to someone determined to see her fail. She saw Nate occasionally, passing in hallways, waiting for elevators. Their interactions were brief, professional, loaded with subtext neither acknowledged. Miss Harper, how are you settling in? Well, thank you. Good. Let me know if you need anything. He never asked specifics, never stopped long enough for real conversation, but his gray eyes held something that might have been concern or curiosity or professional interest. Julia couldn't tell which. The Meridian pitch was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks of preparation compressed into a 90-minute presentation. The client was important enough that the conference room was the large one on the executive floor, the one with the view and the expensive furniture. Julia arrived early, helping set up the presentation materials. Philip arrived precisely on time, already in performance mode. Rebecca attended as company liaison. Nate sat in the back, observing silently. The clients were 3 executives from Meridian Tech, all business casual and evaluative expressions. Philip launched into the pitch with practiced confidence. Market analysis, competitive positioning, multi-platform strategy. He spoke with authority, gesturing to slides that Julia had designed, using data she'd compiled, presenting ideas she'd developed. The clients listened attentively, nodding, taking notes. Halfway through, one of them raised a hand. Middle-aged man, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. This engagement rate projection, can you break down the methodology? Philip didn't miss a beat. Of course, we're using a hybrid model that accounts for platform-specific algorithms and historical user behavior patterns. The client frowned slightly, but the demographic skew here seems inconsistent with standard industry benchmarks. How are you accounting for that discrepancy? Philip paused. Just for a second, but Julia saw it, the brief flicker of uncertainty. The discrepancy is intentional, Philip said smoothly, based on emerging trends in the 18 to 34 bracket. Which trends specifically? Another pause, longer this time. Philip had presented the data but didn't understand the underlying analysis because Julia had done the analysis, and she'd accounted for factors Philip hadn't bothered to read about. The silence stretched uncomfortably. From the back of the room, Nate's voice cut through the tension. Ms. Harper, would you like to field that question? Every head turned toward her. Julia's mouth went dry. She hadn't expected to speak. She was support staff, background. But Nate's expression was expectant, challenging. She stood, moving to the front of the room on legs that felt uncertain. The demographic skew reflects a shift in platform usage patterns over the last 6 months. The 18 to 34 bracket is fragmenting into micro-demographics based on content preference rather than age alone. Our model accounts for that by weighting engagement probability based on behavioral clusters rather than traditional age segments. The client leaned forward. That's a significant deviation from standard targeting. It is, but standard targeting is producing diminishing returns as user behavior becomes more individualized. This approach is more complex to implement, but yields higher conversion accuracy. Can you quantify that? Accuracy improvement? Julia pulled up a supplementary slide she'd prepared, but Philip hadn't included. Comparison data, control groups, statistical significance markers. Preliminary testing shows a 12 to 15% improvement in qualified lead generation compared to traditional demographic targeting. The client studied the data, then nodded slowly. That's compelling. Julia fielded 2 more technical questions before Philip smoothly reclaimed control of the presentation. The pitch concluded 20 minutes later with handshakes and promises to follow up. The clients left. Rebecca departed with them, handling logistics. Philip remained, gathering his materials with sharp, precise movements. His jaw was tight. "A word, Miss Harper." They moved to a smaller conference room down the hall. Philip closed the door with more force than necessary. "You think you're special because Griffin took pity on you?" His voice was low but sharp. "You're on probation, support staff. Your job is to support, not grandstand." Julia forced herself to meet his eyes. "I answered a question. That's my job." "Your job is what I say it is." Philip stepped closer. "You're here on trial, remember that. One wrong move and you're gone." The door opened. Nate stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Philip, my office, now." Philip's face went carefully neutral, of course. He left without looking at Julia. Nate held the door but said nothing to her. His eyes held hers for just a moment before he followed Philip down the corridor. Julia stood alone in the conference room, her heart pounding, uncertain whether she'd just saved her career or destroyed it. An hour later, Morgan found her at her desk. "Nate wants to see you, executive floor." Julia's stomach dropped. The executive floor was quieter, thicker carpet, original art on the walls. She'd only been up here once for her interview. Nate's office was at the corner, glass walls overlooking the city. Inside, modern furniture mixed with older pieces that suggested longevity over trend. He sat behind his desk, reviewing something on his computer, looked up when she entered, closed the door. Julia did, her mouth dry. Nate gestured to a chair. "Sit." She sat. He studied her for a moment, his gray eyes giving nothing away. "Philip has been moved to a different division, effective immediately." Julia's breath caught. "Because of me?" "Because he was taking credit for others' work. Yours wasn't the first complaint, but it was the most documented." "I didn't complain." "No, but Morgan did, and 2 others on your team." Nate leaned back. "I don't tolerate that behavior." Julia processed this. Philip was gone. The person determined to see her fail had been removed. "The senior strategist position you originally interviewed for is available. I'm offering it to you, full salary, effective immediately." The words took a moment to register. Why? The question came out before she could filter it. "Because you're good at your job. That's the only reason that matters." But his eyes suggested there might be more to it than that.